Welcome to the Bariatric Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Lloyd, mindset mentor, somatic coach, and transformational guide for those on the path to true healing. Whether you've had weight loss surgery or on GLP-1s or simply seeking a new way forward with food and your body, this space is for you. This podcast is a mission to change the narrative, unlearning the patterns that no longer serve you, moving beyond quick fixes into deep, embodied healing, lasting mindset shifts, and true self-leadership. We are healing from the roots, rewiring the mind, regulating the body, and returning home to ourselves. We are here for growth rooted in honesty and self-trust because that, my friends, is the foundation of healing. So grab your cup of joe or your H2O and let's go. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Bariatric Mindset Success Podcast here with Dr. Kristen and Coach Frances Vogel. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for having me again. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the topic we've decided on today.
I know. Diet mentality. Diet mentality. I know we talked about diet culture in one of our other episodes. This one is big, especially since a couple weeks ago, I had Dr. Eric Smith on. He's a bariatric surgeon out of Kentucky. He's been on TLC's 1,000-Pound Sisters. I'm so appreciative to have done that episode with him. What I was reminded of, not just from that episode, but when I think about diet mentality, there was actually something that came up that triggered me a couple years ago that I wanted to launch this episode on, and I haven't shared it. It's very vulnerable for me to share. It was the time when GLP-1s first came out and they were in the media, and I was approached by a journalist who knew that I worked in bariatrics, obesity. They were doing a piece for Oprah magazine. I was quoted in the magazine, but the part I was quoted on was interesting because I really wanted to talk about the trauma in our community and how trauma and obesity are so connected. Trauma isn't just sexual abuse. It could be physical abuse, emotional abuse, growing up in a home with domestic violence. Trauma can be so many things, right?
And divorce, bullying. It doesn't even have to be these big things. It could be just it really can be.
So I was quoted that because back before I had surgery, it was probably in the late 90s, I had taken fen-phen. And I remember going to different doctor's offices and they would weigh you, and you would get these pills, right? I cannot speak for anyone else, but I was definitely the type of eater where fast food, highly palatable foods were my main food group. Okay. I did not eat a lot of fruits and vegetables at that time in my life. I was a fast food junkie, and that did not stop when I had the pills. So one of the things that was a concern, I believe in free will. I believe that everybody can make their own choices, but I knew who I was back then, and I was not healthy in my mind. My mind was not healthy. And what I mean by that is even though I was going through a master's program for psychology, I had not made this connection in my brain with regards to my body behaviors that I had. I had no idea I was self-soothing with food. I had no idea that I was coping. I had no idea about anxiety, ADHD. So the quote was, I see people online, which is still true, is where do I get the shot? I don't care if it gives me gastroparesis. I don't care if I poop for days. Just give me the shot. I just have to lose the weight. And it's so ingrained in diet mentality that what I was quoted on was the fen. I don't care if I have a heart attack. I just want to be thin. I just want to be skinny. And that came back into my mind because what shifted for me following weight loss surgery was I thought it was the last thing. I thought it was the barrier between me and being smaller. And that when I started to realize after surgery, oh crap, if I don't change my patterns, I'm going to go backwards. I never thought to myself, oh, there's a pill, there's a shot, there's a thing. I thought this was the last thing. I have to dig deep. I have to go inside. And it wasn't on the surface like, oh, this is diet mentality. It wasn't like that. It was, I'm using food to cope. I didn't even know that I was emotionally hungry. I just knew when I was anxious, I ate. When I was happy, I ate. When I was this, I ate. Eating was in response. It was like a residual behavior, and it happened after any feeling. I bring this up because from that episode with Dr. Eric, we see people, and I had said this to him for surgery, we have the psychological evaluations. There are plastic surgeons that are giving people GLP-1s. We can get them compounded on the internet. It's not about restricting care. What we have a problem with, in my very humble opinion, is that we value thinness as a society, so much so that people will go to extraordinary measures, get medication regardless of the impact. This is not just obesity medicine. This goes beyond that because it has become so accessible. And like I said earlier, I am not trying to be a gatekeeper. However, I have seen so many people with disordered eating patterns, eating disorder, fighting with food, struggling with emotion regulation, struggling with trauma, and there's no screening. And while I know it can be a life-saving medication, it can be an amazing medication, when we utilize it willy-nilly, how is it impacting our bodies? And again, this is where we have free will, but it's more than just the warning signs for gastroparesis. It's more than just the warning signs for what could happen physiologically. And this is important because what happens when we disconnect from ourselves, we don't listen to any of our internal cues because the medication has silenced them to the point that everything is numb. Everything is silenced. And when it does come to obesity medicine and management of diabetes and management of weight, I understand how important these medications can be. And at the same time, are we utilizing them responsibly? Because I know way back when I was not. And I am calling myself out. I'm calling myself out about where I was. And had I not grown in the ways that I have, I would probably be someone out there right now misusing a medication to numb out my hunger, to try to avoid my emotions, to try to avoid feeling anything I haven't dealt with. And this is why psychology and the study of psychology is still a mystery, because we think differently, we respond and react differently, we cope differently, and yet it's so important that we are looking at how we not just address weight and obesity in our bodies, but there is compassion given to us when we don't know how to feel, when we don't know how to trust ourselves around food, when we don't know how to manage our emotions, when we don't know how to manage stressors, even why we undervalue our relationship with ourselves. There are absolutely metabolic and biological factors, and I have had part of that myself, but it's so complex that to say, here, take this, is oversimplified. To say this is the last thing you'll ever have to do is oversimplified. Even for bariatric surgery, it's oversimplified. Because diet mentality has impacted our life. So how we utilize bariatric surgery, how we utilize GLP-1s will shift based on our mindset, our willingness to get support. It's about coming back to ourselves and recognizing the role that diet mentality has played in our weight, how we see ourselves, and how we walk in the world, ultimately. There is a broader scope of diet mentality that we value thinness, we value living in a smaller body. Living in a smaller body doesn't mean a strong body. It doesn't mean a fit body, because they can be skinny fat. They can have sarcopenia. They can be, right? But you know as well as I do, which is why I wanted to talk about diet mentality, is we're working on the emotions, the emotion regulation. If we're not working on the anxiety, there are many different types of food noise. Food noise is not just biology. It's not just leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, and insulin. It's also estrogen, environmental, emotional, it's somatic, cognitive, thought-based, where when we are like, oh, I need something, it's habitual. Why do we think we need something? So food noise, this term that has emerged, right? Interestingly enough, upon the arrival of GLP-1s, it's like, oh, we have a name for it. It's quieted by food noise, right? And we are going to talk about transfer addiction and food addiction in a separate episode. From diet mentality, what I want to share is this ingrained belief system shaped by decades of diet culture equates thinness with worth, food with morality, good or bad, and restriction with success. When people feel, oh, I'm out of control, air quotes, with food, I'm not even going to go down the rabbit hole, but people who know me have heard me say, food is not something to be controlled because it's an inanimate object, but it's not about control. It's about management of our emotions, our emotional state, our nervous system, because when we're anxious, we're looking for safety, for soothing. When I think back to who I was, 96, 97, 98, 99, I'm aging myself. I didn't care if I died. I just wanted to be thin. The shit that I did, that I'm sure we've all done to try to be thin, not just restriction, but then the hunger. So how diet culture shapes us, how diet culture makes us do wacky things. There's another wave of it coming with GLP-1s. And I know I'm sharing this on this episode. I'm not gatekeeping. You can get your meds if you're not also doing the internal work. It doesn't mean just mindset, emotions, somatic, right? If you're not dealing with your relationship with food, friends, the meds it's not just about the weight.
You're going to regain the weight as soon as you go off the medication. You and I have talked about, and it is even being talked more and more about in mainstream media, that you go on these meds, you lose 30, 40, 50 pounds, and then you're like, okay, well, I don't like all those side effects because you have to continue to go up. So you go off of them. And if you haven't done some work around your thoughts, around your personal diet, then you're going to get caught back up in that negative feedback loop of diet mentality, that good, bad food, the calories in, calories out. And the more and more I know that you and I are learning, and the people that are in this field looking more into, it's not about calories in, calories out. It's about the quality of the calories and what we're putting in our body and why we're putting it in there and the emotion that drives it all. We're looking at, and I just looked it up because I was kind of interested to see what the diet industry kind of worth is. And we're looking at $500 billion. That is a lot of money that is going towards people wanting to lose weight. And it's all about this desire to be thin. Some people want to be healthy, but most people are just looking at trying to fit into a smaller body to meet a social norm. I hope that we'll see that shift in our lifetime. When you had surgery, you thought that was the end all be all, right? That was it. I'm going to have surgery and my body's thin and I'm never going to have to worry about this again. What you came to understand very quickly is no, that's just the beginning, because this is a process. It's a lifelong process. Obesity is a disease. It is not a moral compass issue. It is truly a disease, and it's being touted by the GLP-1 industry as being able to be fixed very quickly. And that is just not the case. Whether you're on a GLP-1 or not, or you've had bariatric surgery, there is a mind shift that needs to happen around the food that we put in our bodies. You can be on a GLP-1 and eat like crap. You're going to feel like crap, and it's not going to be successful. Those that are on a GLP-1 that are changing their diet, just like the honeymoon stage after bariatric surgery, there's this honeymoon stage on GLP-1 where you really get to make these choices on changing the way you eat. And you can change the way you eat. You can be successful if you are mindful of why you're towards highly palatable foods when life gets uncomfortable. And that's the deep work that you do. You and I have been doing that, you've been doing for years, is that when you get uncomfortable, you're being triggered into eating foods that are highly palatable, that taste good, that have some kind of emotional calming sense for you. I mean, I love the story that you shared because it reminds me that there's always this aha moment that we have. For most of us who are in this field, they have an aha moment about diet. For me, just to quickly share, it was early in 2020, pandemic had hit, and I had noticed some behaviors coming back that I was very curious about. I knew that it was a response to a very traumatic event that was happening for us all. But I also knew that if I didn't start doing some work on how I handled traumatic events or stress or just adversity, then I was going to regain all the weight I'd lost. So that was my aha moment, because I was and still am a fairly clean eater. I choose to eat foods that are not highly processed. There are foods that I do eat that are highly processed. I consume alcohol on occasion, but it's the 90% of the time or 80% of the time, depending if I'm at home or not, 70% of the time, where I'm eating a very clean diet, because that is nurturing my body. And that's my personal diet. I'm not buying into the diet culture. I'm buying into what works well for me and my personal body. And everybody's is different, depending. Right. And we were talking about this before we started recording. Everybody has their own kind of metabolic system. What works for me may not work for you. I might need a high protein diet, whereas you may need less of that. I might need a richer in vegetables and fruits and grains, and that works really well for my body. And that's where I think we look at our genetics. The reason why some of us are more overweight than others is there's a genetic component. It always dictates where we're from. How did our ancestors eat? How did our family eat? And when did obesity start arising in our particular family? And, you can almost track it. When we started coming into this, the food that we eat here in the States is so different than the food that's eaten in other countries. And the more that you are an advanced society, the higher the obesity rates are.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about that genetic component. So yes, there's also a difference in women and men. There's a difference in where we come from and our background. One of the most interesting things that popped into my mind is, for my body, I've had my genetics done. There was a specific genetic testing kit that I had done that focuses on nutrition. I'm a fast caffeine metabolizer. It's like fun fact, right? I metabolize caffeine very quickly. Now, certain things that I need are like selenium. I tend to be low on selenium, which is a nutrient. There's an anti-aging supplement called glutathione, which helps with cells that I tend to be more high in. So why that's interesting is my body also, it said that I tend to do better with lower carbs. It doesn't say keto. It doesn't give me a grams per day. It just says that my body tends to run more efficiently when I have more protein and less carbs. I've not had my husband's genetics tested, but here's what I know. My body, also from my genetic testing, tends to weigh more than average. No shit. Right? My husband has always been very thin, like what we may call naturally thin. In his 40s, he has been pre-diabetic because his diet, he doesn't eat meat. He's never liked it. He's always been a vegetarian with some fish twice a year, ovo-lacto vegetarian, where he's had to shift to have less carbs to manage his pre-diabetes. But even in the height of that diagnosis, he never got over 210 pounds. He's 6'1", maybe slightly overweight, but he stopped eating bread and he dropped to 185 like nobody's business. But that's also the difference in men and women, testosterone, estrogen, right? The hormones. But he is also from North Africa. I have Eastern European genetics, but it was very difficult for him to lower his carbs. He had to do a lot of work to do that. I will tell you this, and I don't know if I've shared this. I was the person that give me 2 Big Macs over a Big Mac and fries. Like, I will take 2 burgers all day long, way back when. Like, obviously not now, but back in the day, I was the double burger, save one for later queen. I didn't care about fries. Fries were not my priority. So I wanted more of the other stuff. Whereas now I can have a burger, no bun, no problem, doesn't faze me, because I've never been really interested in the carbs. Whereas he's like rice with just a tiny bit of veggies. I'm like, give me the veggies and a tiny bit of rice. When we start to look at our patterns, but also what do we gravitate towards? Sometimes it's dopamine, sometimes it's the palate, right? How we've trained our palate, which is also why highly palatable foods are a thing. When we look at diet mentality and restriction, now we're talking about how have we conditioned our mind to see food, right? So if you've gone through, and again, I'm not demonizing any quote unquote plan. There is a woman, I forget her name. I follow her, but she has coined a phrase. It is not my phrase. That's why I want to say it. It's called bio-individual nutrition. I love that phrase because I think that when we look at nutrition, I am not a dietitian. I'm not a nutritionist. I have practiced and learned what works for my body and what doesn't. And I think that it comes from practice. I know that when you were talking about your way of eating, that you've learned that too, but it comes through practice. It doesn't come through someone saying, eat this, not that. Like, yes, that can help us hone that for ourselves. Yet when we have a background or a history of diet mentality, the women that we work with, decades of dieting can biologically slow our metabolism. Weight loss surgery can help reset that, and potentially GLP-1s can reset that. I say potentially because research is still coming out. Strength training, all of those things can be important for our metabolic rate. Yet, what happens with a diet mentality, that takes over. Whether you've had weight loss surgery or you're on a GLP-1, oh, I didn't lose weight this week. The number on the scale says this. The number on the scale, that. So then we have folks that are so focused on their outcome that they're not focused on, am I getting enough greens? Am I getting enough protein? Am I eating foods that make my body feel good? If their measurement is what size jeans they're in, if the measurement is the number on the scale, if the number on the scale determines if you have a good day or a bad day, you might have diet mentality, right?
Absolutely. I think that also discussing too, when we do this deeper work, it can seem to a lot of people, because one of the things that we start with is tracking, and that can be extremely regulating for people who have been in diet thinking for so long. The reason why we track is because we're looking at patterns. We're looking at what foods work well in your body. When are you eating the potato chips? What happened to you an hour before, 30 minutes or 15 minutes before you went into the kitchen? Is it late at night? Are you grazing late at night because you're exhausted? Are you, the midday slump at 3:00 that you just are crashing so hard? Well, what did you eat for? Or you're ravished because what you had for breakfast is triggering an insulin spike, and then you're crashing because you ate too much of one thing. So it's really this tracking of what's happening in your life, tracking your sleep, tracking your water, tracking your vitamins, tracking your stress. We all have these new devices that we wear, Fitbits or Apple Watches. She's worried about, and it's tracking these things, and it's tracking them for reasons so that you can notice patterns and what is your pattern and what happened. How is your heart rate increased when you are driving? I learned something very interesting about myself. When I got in my car, I was immediately hungry. Why are you hungry? You don't need anything to eat. You're in the car driving from point A to point B. But what I discovered, it was anxiety.
Wow.
When I'm in the car, I'm transitioning from one place to another, and transitions can be very difficult for people. It was difficult for me, and I didn't know it, but I learned this about myself through this journey. And so I'm in the car. I want to eat. Well, I'm anxious. What am I anxious about? I'm anxious about what's going to happen wherever I go, whether it's transitioning from the office to home, transitioning from going to pick the kids up from school or a game, or I've got to go to a meeting. It's all of those different things and understanding what that means. And I think that's when we're talking about the diet mentality, you get into these, this diet, I'm going to lose 15 or 20 pounds. I'm going to restrict. I'm going to binge. I'm going to restrict, I'm going to binge. And then this is the yo-yo. And this is how so many of us, we may have started with having a little bit more weight than what is socially normal. You start to lose that, right? Let's say you're 15 pounds heavier than the weight you're supposed to be. And so you're like, I got to lose 15 pounds. You go on and then you lose that 15 pounds, but then life gets good. You get yourself a friend or two. And then all of a sudden you're up 20 pounds. You're like, oh, I got to lose the 20 pounds. And then you do this again and again. And this is what happened for me. And I think what happens for a lot of people is they get on this yo-yo and then their body becomes so metabolically broken.
Yeah.
At the point where I had surgery, I was not going to lose 100 pounds. It was not going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. No matter what diet I went on. And I've been kind of geeking out these days, listening to some podcasts. I listened to the one that you did with Dr. Smith, but I also have been listening to Dr. Andrew Drinkins, who wrote Why We Eat Too Much. Great book. And he's got some great information about why biologically things are happening the way that they're happening. I'm one of those folks that really likes to get some information before I know how I'm feeling about things. I know how it's working with my body, but let me delve in to get a little bit more information. I hope that the folks that are listening to this are also trying to delve in to get more information of what they can do, what works, not work for you. But I do know that how we get to where we got is important. Our bodies have metabolically changed, and then you have surgery and you go on a GLP-1, that helps to create a new set point, weight set point. That's basically where your body wants to naturally stabilize itself. It's how people lose that 10 pounds they gain over the Christmas holiday, the freshman 15. It's how your body regulates itself back. It's always fighting. Our body's always fighting to get back into homeostasis. But when you're 100 pounds overweight, your body's fighting to keep that 100 pounds on because that's what it knows. That's where it's comfortable. The yo-yo dieting just doesn't help. We have an industry out there that's pushing that because we have a society that believes thin is strong, that thin is powerful, that thin is they're going to get things done. That thinking really needs to shift. We need to move more into bodies being healthy. I want to be healthy. I want to feed my body healthy foods. I want to move my body in a healthy way. I want to have a healthy mind.
I think that also, we haven't talked about this so much, but body image and the judgment that we may carry around our bodies. One of the things that I've seen people talk about online is, oh gosh, I wish I never had surgery. Now I have this hanging skin, which we're not going to go down. Well, then there's plastics or then there's this, right? Yet the body image, part of it is body satisfaction and body dysmorphia. I had even done a post about what I call reverse body dysmorphia. Like I didn't even think I was that big, air quotes, before surgery. And then after you feel bigger. And so that's why I say it's like almost a reverse, because it's not that we think that we're bigger than we are, but sometimes we can think that we're smaller than we are. Our vision after surgery, there can be this adjustment period and things like that. But body image in general is also, how am I supposed to look? It could be the social construct, because the other thing that I think is really important to take away is, again, from this point of safety and security and nervous system regulation, our bodies and our brains are always asking this very foundational and fundamental question. Am I safe? Am I accepted? Do I belong? So let's look at diet mentality from a standpoint of protection, right? Our nervous system is protecting us. If I am the biggest person in the room and big equals bad, hypothetically, because that's what we've been taught, and thin equals good, I'm on the out group. I'm an outlier. Everybody else is on the inside of something because they fit in. So yes, we have these wonderful quotes like, why fit in when you can stand out? When it comes to survival and safety, so when we talk about very primal things, a lot of my diet mentality happened in my early 20s and my teens, right after puberty. That's when my weight started to pile on.
Puberty hits and you're uncomfortable in your body with your social group. Where do you find comfort? For so many women, that is when it happens. Athletes typically don't blow up until they stop their sport, which could be mid-20s. That's exactly what happens. It happens for men as well. You're out there playing sports, consuming constantly, and your body needs it for fuel, but it doesn't equal out the over consumption.
but the onset of something else, which is very biological, which is what I'm getting to, which is mating season, which when you're looking for a mate, it doesn't happen right after puberty, but in your early 20s. For some people, it could be 18. High school is when you first start dating. Maybe not everybody, maybe it's earlier, but I would say for most, it's that high school age. And you're still kind of new in this body that has all of these raging hormones. But the biological is, as a species, it's reproduction. And you're looking for a mate. And then what are we seeing? Because I work with a lot of women. Some are married, some are divorced, some are single. How this all plays into diet mentality is when I work with a woman in her 50s who says, okay, I've had weight loss surgery and now I want to date. Interesting, because I need to be this weight. I have to look like this. I need to cut all this skin off because we're looking for someone else's approval. Am I going to be good enough? It's like peacock feathers. Am I good enough? I know we're not talking about relationships today, but this is important stuff, right? So it can happen from both. It can happen across gender too, right? So it could also happen with men, whereas I just think that as women, there's so much social pressure that it may not show up as much with men. I would say that men are more pressured within the gay community. I could be totally wrong about this. I think heterosexual men are more accepted at a higher weight than gay men.
That's probably a fairly fair social statement based on observation. I would agree, because we judge each other when you're young and you have this issue of being overweight or obese at a young age. You get into the shame spiral. We're trying to belong, like you said earlier, these fundamental factors that really dictate who we are. And when we're told that in order to belong, you must fit into a certain box. And that can be very traumatic for those that don't fit into that box. We are starting to realize that there are many different types of people. We have neurodivergent folks that are coming out. We are really starting to understand more about people's personalities. Hopefully, as we start to embrace different types of personalities, they will feel less shamed into hiding their differences by using food as a coping mechanism. There's a genetic component to this. And then we get into genetic components about personalities. It used to be back in the day, these people were just quirky. Now we're really starting to look and see more and more about, their spectrum. People are on the spectrum. It's important to mention this because when we were younger, we didn't have those definitions and we didn't understand it. So there may have even been a portion of us that were utilizing food to really hide behind some of those parts of our personalities.
Absolutely.
And that's where the work you do, we're in constant movement, trying to shift those thoughts and feelings into actions that aren't self-destructive. We look at transfer addiction, right? A lot of times when we have bariatric surgery or get on this GLP-1 and no longer utilize food to serve that purpose, there is this risk of transfer addiction. And going back to something that you had mentioned earlier, we had psych evals before we had bariatric surgery. There are not psych evals before people get on GLP-1s that I'm aware of. When you can order that on the internet and it arrives at your house and you're just taking the shots, there's no evaluation to see if you are at risk for transfer addiction.
That's ordered eating.
Absolutely. Or have an eating disorder. Do these psych evaluations for these doctors and psychiatrists to just look and see, okay, this person is looking for surgery. They're 110. They have an eating disorder. These are questions that are not necessarily being asked. We can talk about big pharma all day long. They're pushing this type of GLP-1 on people that potentially may not need them. That's a whole nother conversation.
But it's also coming from diet culture and coming back to that primitive, do I belong? Do I fit in? Which I know we went on a couple different tangents, but if we come back to diet mentality as a whole, in terms of where does it, and again, this isn't about solving the world's problems. The other facet of this that has come up, because one of the things that I've done a lot of personal work on is, can I accept myself where I am? So it's this DBT philosophy, dialectical behavior therapy construct which is dialectics, two opposing opposites being true at the same time, right? Acceptance and change. Acceptance and change. Can I accept where I am in my body as a perimenopausal woman who has maintained her weight very well and maybe up 10 pounds because of hormones and estrogen? Can I accept this without restricting? Can I accept that my body is going through a transition? I'm using myself as an example here. Can I accept without punishing myself through deprivation or restriction, without using diet mentality? Can I accept that this is where I am and also continue to want to create positive change for the long term? I've gotten to a place where I can say yes. Right after surgery, I was not in acceptance. I hated that fat bitch. That is exactly what I will say about myself. I am not there. That's worlds away. When you hear the judgment and the hatred, and when we think of the thoughts we have in our head about our body, where it comes from is we judge ourselves lazy, no self-control, no willpower, no discipline. Those are quite harsh. The idea that I should hide eating in front of people, should never eat in front of people, that's wrong because you shouldn't eat at all. Like, these are negative thoughts that I would have about myself way back when, because there was no tolerance, there was no love, there was no compassion, because I required that my body look a certain way to be accepted. I had to prove to myself that I was worthy through appearance. And I'm sure that people are hearing this are probably identifying because it's common. I see it all the time. And we just don't go from hating to acceptance until we do some inner work.
True. There's the difference between those of us that are in this diet mentality, diet culture, diet spiral for all of our lives. There's the difference between us fighting this in my early 50s, fighting that perimenopausal, little middle fluff, versus my friends that have also gone through it, who have not been in the diet roller coaster, who are accepting of themselves with their little 5, 6, 7, 8 pound. They may not like it, but they're okay with it. Whereas for folks that, especially, you and I have had bariatric surgery, it is a freak out. It is a total,
yes, I know.
And so that's why I have to really pull in and make sure you're eating as clean as you can. Make sure that you're moving your body for your mental health. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Look at some hormone replacement therapies if it works for you. Look at some of these other options that really could potentially be helpful while you're going through this transition from mother to crone. I really don't like that word crone, but I'm going to use it because I guess I'm headed into it and I need to get place. And that's where I think that a lot of, as they're transitioning from the viral young stud into the more seasoned gentleman, and they get the love handles. For men, it's more acceptable in society for them to carry more weight. But for those that have been on the diet yo-yo back as well, because listen, we had someone reach out the other day. It's like, where's the men? Where's the men's group? We need and I'm like, I get it. I'm there. I'll be more than happy. I would love to facilitate a men's group, because I know, coming from a family that also has weight, I see and I hear and I've watched them as well do that yo-yo BS. Guys, we really need to follow the food. We need to follow the food that we're putting in our body. To me, this wasn't a problem 100 years ago.
Other thing is, 100 years ago, we still had body diversity.
And it was acceptable to be diverse in your body.
It was acceptable to have body diversity.
But we didn't have obesity.
The extent that we do now, it was very rare. The other thing I want to share is, and I have done some reading on this, so I'm not ignorant heading into this topic, but one of the things in talking about body neutrality and body acceptance and shifting out of diet mentality, I have read different books, one of them being Health at Every Size, or the movement that's behind Health at Every Size. And one of the key indicators from that movement is that individuals who are slightly overweight, not obese, slightly overweight, there are positively associated health outcomes. right? When we're talking about BMIs, I hate BMI. I think they're outdated. I think they're archaic. Body composition, I personally believe, is a much better marker of health and wellness. I digress. The negative part about health at every size that I'm going to call out is that just like in every community, there are positives and negatives. We've got to outweigh them. But there's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum. What I have seen within health at every size is that it does give people an excuse for poor behavior. And I've seen it. That said, I think that health at every size has helped bringing about the understanding of body diversity and body neutrality, because diet mentality is a mind F. It is a mind F. And now, when I go to the beach, I see women who are in their bikinis and they got a belly. You go, girl. What I am interested in, though, for me and the people that I work with, is I want to be healthy. So the question that I tend to ask people is, what do you want? Do you want to be skinny? Do you want to be healthy? Do you want to be fit? Do you want to be strong? And sometimes these words have a psychological connotation based on social criteria or social factors. Where diet mentality comes in, why we're talking about it, and why I think it's important, is it's not about right or wrong or judgment. Like, why are you having bariatric surgery? Why are you having a GLP-1? Everybody has their own opinion and their own decision-making of why they want it. So again, this isn't about gate, but what we need to come back to is, when I'm making decisions about my body, 25-year-old me didn't give a flip about dying, right? 45-year-old, 47-year-old me is like, how do I be the healthiest person possible for this next phase of my life? That's a shift. So why we had surgery may have been to be healthy. What are we aligned with our decisions and our choices? Because I know there are people out there who are on a GLP-1 that will say, I want to be healthy, I want to be strong, and this is going to help me do that. Great. I also know there are people on a GLP-1 who are still in diet mentality. These things exist. I think we need to identify that they both exist, and it's not about right or wrong. It's, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? And is it for external validation? Is it for external acceptance? Is it for belonging, which, by the way, is social and cultural and psychological, and do need to be a size 4 to belong? I'm bringing this to people's attention because I just want to hug all the people that are like, I just want to force my body into submission because I can't lose this last 20 pounds. There's so much shame and anger and frustration that the social and cultural implications of diet mentality have created so that this person hates their body so much that they will go to any length to try to get that number to go down. I don't know about you, but that's not healthy. And yet I'm here to help herd those who want come to acceptance. But I also recognize that where a lot of people tend to be stuck, they don't know how to get from that body hatred to acceptance when the body is not responding to certain things. It could be medication, it could be surgery, it could be food, it could be exercise. And that's the thing that I know is a deep part of the work. But I say that because you do you, right? Every person's going to have their own decision. And if there's somebody who's like, I'm going to keep my diet mentality, fine, you do you. But for the people who are like, I'm tired of fighting my body, I don't want to hate myself this much. This doesn't feel normal. Like, can I belong? Can I accept my body? Acceptance does not mean that you stop taking action. But that is also what diet mentality kind of makes you believe, is that if you accept that you're in a size 14, I'm just giving a hypothetical, that you're less than.
And if you're willing to go to any length, then you need to do the work on the inside. I'm willing to go to any length, but they're not willing to sit down and do the real work. And the real work starts, it's an inside job. it takes place between your two ears and your heart. Joining a group like what you offer, or some kind of community that's going to support them where they are. I remember when I first started therapy some years ago around my relationship with my husband, I thought, oh, I don't want to change because I'm not willing to lose my relationship. And I thought, oh, if I dig too deep, then he's not going to like me. I became a better person, and my relationship became, so many people get so fearful of change that they aren't willing to do the work behind it, because what happens if I change and no one loves me? If you change, love will come along with you. I have met nobody ever along the journey who has worked on themselves, who hates the work they have done and hates themselves for doing the work.
When you're in it, it's tough. In the messy middle, it's tough. But when they get on the other side, you are totally right. You nailed it. Because when you're on the other side and you've done the work, there's nobody that's like, I regret working on myself. No, it's usually like, oh, thank God I did that. I'm a better human.
And I love myself. And I really want to just remind people that what bariatric surgery and what GLP-1s do is they give you a tool to create space to work on these things, to work on the inside job, to work on the food that we're putting in our body, regulating our nervous system, create systems to create new habits, to make sure that we can be successful. And if that's what you're looking for, continue to follow Kristen, continue to be part of this community, continue to put yourself in places where this is the work being done. If you've got a 20, 30 pound regain after bariatric surgery, I promise there are things that we can do that you can do that you're not starving, that you're not restricting your life,
right,
that you can do that can help reduce some of the regain. People think after bariatric surgery that the regain is from their lowest weight. A lot of times that lowest weight was not ever a real weight to begin with. There is always a kind of a pendulum that shifts.
like a rebound.
If you're not working with a surgeon that explains that to you, that's unfortunate. I wish that all surgeons would explain that to their patients. You may over swing and lose a little bit more than what is sustainable for you. And then you can come back. And some people never got to goal at all. And that's where adding a GLP-1 in there can help boost that metabolic system to help them lose that last 20 or 30 pounds. Those are the tools that your bariatric doctor can help you navigate to help you get to the healthy.
Partnership also with,
it is a partnership
with lifestyle change, because
absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to add on the diet mentality, and I know we're wrapping up, is that diet mentality keeps people stuck in a I'm broken / fix me mode instead of stepping into an empowered identity or a partnership with their body. Diet mentality is often the root of disordered eating behaviors. So another thing, we're going to talk about disordered eating at another time, but diet mentality, yo-yo dieting, food guilt, binge restrict cycle, deprivation. I'm not allowed to have that. And there's so many people that say, if I allow myself to have that, I'll gorge on it. Well, that's because you don't have self-trust. You don't have a healthy relationship with food. You've put food on the pedestal. And when you have food on the pedestal and you have one food that matters more than another food, you have a food hierarchy. So if you're worshiping chocolate and you're afraid, it's because of the psychological connection that you have with whatever that food is, because you've put it on a pedestal. So if you take it off the pedestal, and if it's just food, that was one of the big transitions that I made, was it's just food. It's just food. Some core features of diet mentality: obsession with weight versus health. So, I gained 3 pounds. It could be an enormity of things, right? Weight versus health. How healthy are you? All or nothing thinking, on the wagon, off the wagon thinking. People will say, I get off track. I use this term too, because it's something that people recognize. I don't like using it, but it's almost like I have for people to identify themselves. They on the wagon, off the wagon, on track, off track. When you have a healthy relationship with food, there is no track. There is no track, because you're starting to shift your relationship with food where there isn't a food hierarchy. And then external rules, diet mentality, replacing internal signals. And this is another thing that I see show up. I talked about it in a previous episode. We lose internal signals when we rely on external rules, and then reliance on quick fixes versus sustainable shifts. If there is one takeaway, when we want quick fixes, when we want to lose 15 pounds in 15 days, when we want to, why is my weight loss stalling? Why is this? Why is that? There's this propensity that we have of, I'm doing something wrong, because that's also what diet mentality teaches. So my encouragement of everybody listening to this episode is be curious. I'm up 3 pounds. What could that be? I've been up 3 pounds for 3 weeks. What could that be? It's not about micromanaging your food. It's looking at all of the potentials and all of the possibilities and being curious versus it's almost like a fireman and a fire hose. Like we're putting out a fire. We're 3 pounds up. That's diet mentality. But when we can say, okay, 3 pounds, I see you. It's that process. If you're doing your process and you're focused on health, it's not just nutrition. It's not just movement. It's not just sleep. But when you're focused on, I'm going to be healthy. And so this is what I got to do for sleep. This is what I got to do for my nutrition. This is what I'm going to do for my mood and my body. And here's how I'm going to move. All of those things. That's health. And the outcome, the results are going to be there. But when you're
Absolutely
on the outcome and you're trying to manipulate the outcome, but you're inconsistent with your process, it's diet mentality. Because what you're saying is, I'll work out if you respond, body, limit my calories when you respond, body. It's very toddler-esque or very childish because there's this, I need the body to respond. So there's this punitive aspect too, like you're not allowed to have cake. You're on a diet. That's diet mentality versus where do I include cake as part of my lifestyle versus I'm eating cake every day. There are differences, there are nuances, and that's the shift. When we don't trust ourselves with food has more power because we have given our power away to food, whether it's to soothe or to cope, and that is the work. So diet mentality is the linchpin. It's a thing that is keeping us in a cycle. Whereas when we can start to practice compassion, kindness, love, acceptance, understanding, forgiveness, releasing criticism and judgment of our body, and being more compassionate with food, taking food off the pedestal, we're going to see a shift. We're going to see a shift. Not tomorrow.
It's a long game. It really is. And it's making those healthy choices every day, most of the time. But that's all we can hope for, making healthy choices most of the time. I think the key to living a healthier lifestyle is choosing ourselves. And I want to reiterate how important it is to find a community that supports you in a healthy lifestyle. You offer that community, Kristen, but there are other communities out there. Whether you find it here or elsewhere, find that community and make sure that you tap yourself in and that you're doing it from love and not from shame or from guilt.
Yeah. It's so important. Okay, diet mentality, that's a wrap. Guys, come back and listen to us again. We have another episode coming on transfer addiction and disordered eating. So stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. As always, sending you all a lot of love. Check us out on the socials at Bariatric Mindset, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and join us in our free Facebook community, Bariatric Mindset Mavens. The links will be in the show notes. Thank you, Frances, for being here with me today.
All right, Beth.